And we continue our study of the book of Leviticus. And we started lesson 4 today, where we tried to get our concepts down about the sacrifices, and you'll see them with these concepts brought in later on. Hope you'll catch up or pick up on the meaning of things, like when there's guilt and there needs to be retribution because you took something away that belonged to them. That's applied to the Nazirite vow. Well, the Nazirite, he touched a dead body, and he did not keep his vow to God. And so things are given back to God in tithing. Those are the trespass offerings. Sin is just the offerings, is the iniquity. The peace offerings deals with fellowship, as there would be sharing with God and sharing with the priest and sharing with your friends with the peace offerings. And so those concepts, I think, will be repeated in their context, where you'll make an understanding about, well, there's the concept, and what's so wonderful about Jesus, he fulfilled every one of those concepts. And that becomes something that in God's wisdom, and here he is in particularly dealing with his people, and especially the priest, that he would fulfill those things. And we are, just because we dwell in the Word of God, we can see that and then test it, and it tests it real well. About who Jesus is. We saw last week, he was crucified outside the city. When you took the blood inside the sanctuary, he cleansed heaven. He cleansed made our way to heaven a possibility. You would have the body outside. He said, we have an altar that we can partake of that the priest cannot, because we're partaking of Jesus in his word. And it's in the concept of how he fulfilled all of those things. So that's worth, to me, this study. So now, why are we having, in chapter 6 through the end of chapter 7, just a rehash? We're going to have these same offerings talked about. But it's not a rehash. Notice 3 times with me, beginning with chapter 6 and verse 9. Where you might say, well, this is not something that it's just restating things. It does restate things, but if you've done the questions, you'll realize what is unique about it now. What new thing have we learned about those sacrifices? And the reason behind it is that you might find the key in the fact that he's commanding not the people, but he's commanding Aaron. He's commanding Moses to command Aaron and his sons things. So it'll be things that are especially important to the priest, not to me. Not to me as an individual Israelite, but to a priest. And it just so happens that's what's unique about it. That's different from what we've learned in the first 6 chapters, especially the first 4. He says, command Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the what? Burnt offering. Well, we've already talked about the burnt offering, first 4 and into the 6 chapters with sin offerings and trespass offerings. The law of the burnt offering, and he speaks about that. Notice in verse 20, in verse 19, Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, this is the oblation of Aaron and his sons, which they shall offer unto Jehovah in the day when he's anointed, when the priest is anointed. That would affect the high priest. And it's a new section. When you see this phrase, he's beginning again. He's beginning some new section, and we need to be able to understand the difference there. What is the word? And we've talked about this. Your Bible may have the word itself translated into that word. But what is the word in verse 20? This is, my Bible says, oblation. Let's call it a sacrifice. Let's call it an offering. And, excuse me? Somebody say another one? Okay. When a Jew said, I can't take care of you, Mom and Dad, because I have offered this offering to God, it is korban. Korban. You remember that in the New Testament? It's korban. I've dedicated it unto God. It is an offering. That's this word oblation. This is an offering that is dedicated unto God. And but it is that term that we see in the Greek translation of the Hebrew, korban. And so when it comes out in our Bible, it says korban, that in the New Testament, that's an oblation. That's a sacrifice. That's something that's dedicated unto God. So he said, this is the oblation that Aaron and his sons which they shall offer in the day when they are what? They are anointed. They really belong to God. And so he uses that word oblation. In verses 24 and 25 in this 6th chapter, Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the law of the sin offering. Got a burnt offering, got a sin offering. And we're just going to look at those and answer our questions, because there's some things we learn about this that we don't see earlier. It was just the idea, here, Jewish people, in Leviticus, and he's saying this from Mount Sinai, here's what these offerings are. And they'll be for rulers, for priests, for individuals, the common people, and we've gone through that. So we've got that down. So we asked this question. Since he started in verse 9, and this is different from the first 8 verses of chapter 6, so that's why we have a new section. How many burnt offerings were offered each day? So you may not have seen that in the early ones, but in your Bible study, you know from the text here, he will tell you if you don't remember. Notice what he says. This is the law of the burnt offering. So anybody answer that question? Between 1 and 5, what is it? Okay, you don't know. Verse 9. Command Aaron, this is the law of the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall be on the hearth upon the altar night unto the morning. And he emphasizes this throughout this section through verse 13. And the fire of the altar shall be kept burning thereon. The priest shall put on his linen garment. Verse 11. And he shall put it aside and take the ashes outside. Verse 12. The fire upon the altar shall be kept burning thereon. It shall not go out. Priests need to understand that. This is direction from the priest. This is something he's going to be in charge of. That's why we have this section. It's not a rehash. It's new information to grasp and to get into context. The priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and he shall lay the burnt offering in order upon it, and shall burn thereon the fat of the peace offerings. Fire shall be kept burning upon the altar continually. It shall not go out. Okay, I got it. Emphasis is important. And we realized that here was something, but we began to see there was something on the altar at night, and then there was something on the altar in the morning. It's called a burnt offering, so there are 2 burnt offerings a day. I don't care if anybody brings any other offering to them. There will be those 2 burnt offerings, one in the morning and one in the daytime. And we see in Exodus the 29th chapter this thought, and it has a lot of implications for us, as we'll see a little bit later. But Exodus 29, 38 through 42. Now this is that which shall offer upon the altar 2 lambs a year, one day by day continually. 2 lambs a year old, day by day continually. So if you remember the book of Exodus, you'd have read through the first 4 chapters of Leviticus, and you may not have gotten this point. But now the priest gets the point. It's going to be important that he understands this. And so they'll offer the lamb, and they'll offer it in the morning, offer it in the evening. But what was never going to happen on that altar where the burnt offering is? Fire will not go out. So Nadab and Abihu, where did you get your fire? Well, the fire wasn't burning that day. Really? Where did you get your fire? You're supposed to get it from the altar. That never went out. So you would have fire to light your censer, to take your incense into the altar of incense and offer to God. But you offered up a strange fire because you didn't get it from the right source. Picky, picky, picky. But the point is that he has no excuse. We're going to do it a new way. We're going to do something different. Fire is fire, big deal. And yet what we see is that God had authorized this. This is where the fire was to be taken. And it was never going to go out at all. So there's offerings of the burnt offering 2 times a day. What was the concept of the burnt offering? We have a little word before that a lot of times in our Bibles. Whole burnt offerings, where the entire animal was offered up. What does it mean? What's the concept? Danny, you halfway? You want to answer that? Or comment? Go ahead. No, please. Go ahead.
A lot of times when you bring up these things like the strange fire, and people come back and tell you, oh, well, we're not under the old law anymore. May not be, but the nature of God did not change just because the law changed.
That's right. And we see what pleases him, what doesn't. That hasn't changed. And he's given us a new law. So we follow that. And that becomes important. So we're looking at the idea of the burnt offering. Whole burnt offering is total dedication unto God. Totally dedicated unto God. Burnt offerings I will not accept, but Jesus came, I came to do thy will, O God. He just fulfilled it. He came in the body to do the will of God. He's dedicated unto God. And that burnt offering says, God, we are dedicated unto you every day and night. That was going to be that's our relationship with you, to be totally dedicated to you. And here is the offering in the morning, here's the offering in the evening, and here the high priest, they are offering that. And that becomes something that we see is important here. When would the fires of the altar before the tent of meeting go out? Question number 2. I mean, don't say it because I just said it, but do you see the text there that would be? I'll answer that question. I will say they never went out. And the blood never dried. Blood was flowing. And that was, I got from an old book one time. I'll never forget that and start preaching. I said, oh, really? And, they would take the ashes, put on the side of the altar. I'm not saying they didn't clean things, but the point is that blood and that whole burnt offering, that was a continual reminder that indeed we have a relationship with thee. As we'll see, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. And so that relationship with him. What else did you find interesting in that section that we haven't seen? We've seen it before in Scripture, but we haven't talked about it much. Why does he change his clothes? He changes his clothes. Once he offers that, he shall put on, in verse 10, excuse me, what kind of garments? Linen garments. And they're called his linen what? Okay. Can we say breeches? My Bible says breeches. And that's the way I read it. But trousers is better. Probably got a crease, huh? Why were those important to the priest's garment? And we'll talk about that in chapters 8 through 10. That's right. We see it in Exodus as well. And he was going to be attending to the altar. Linen, a lot of times they're white. He had a linen headdress. A lot about his garment was linen, but here he says linen breeches. And he was to have those on whenever he's attending to the altar. Those will be his holy garments. And yet he's dissecting that body. His blood is sprinkled. If he got blood on the things, he would wash that inside at the tent of meeting. But it's interesting about the linen. Would that come from an animal or a flax plant? Blue flowers. And they would take those strands and they would make fine linen. It was something that, you know, people of luxury would have, but it would be somewhat of a cooler garment than what? Maybe cooler than wool. And why I say that is because here's part of God's wisdom. But in Ezekiel, the 44th chapter, read with me verse 17. Now realize that Ezekiel is dealing with his temple that he's foreseen. And but it's interesting how he uses the imagery of that in speaking about this temple that's going to be reestablished in Jerusalem. They're going to go into captivity. They're going to come back. So he's in that time frame. He said, "It shall be when they enter in at the gate of the inner court." He's speaking about back up in the descendants of Zadok. You know, we're talking about the high priest. You go to the inner court. They shall be clothed with linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them when they minister in the gates of the inner court and within. They'll have linen tires at the headdress and so forth, but no wool, which is a little bit more, which is hotter when you work it. You want linen or you want wool? And why is that? Now here's what the translator did in my Bible. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causeth sweat. Don't tell me he wasn't thinking about that. God was thinking about that. Sweat. Wool become from an animal. Linen doesn't. So you're not offering up, you're not putting on something that you'd have to kill an animal to get. But it was used in that dedication of the priest. And the point Richard made is fine, because we see that's exactly what we see in Exodus, that it was to cover the nakedness. And you'll see pictures of linen trousers, breeches, and they will go to the knee because that covers the loin. And there was that sexual connection with looking at nakedness, and that's how they were. Then when they got that, they take the ashes outside. And we see it's in order for those things that happen, that when they would offer in verse 11 in a clean place, and the fire upon the altar shall be burned, shall not go out, and the priest shall burn the wood on it every morning. So there is the linen garment in his flesh. He'll take the ashes whereto that fire hath consumed, the burnt offering on the altar, and he shall offer that. We can talk a little bit more about that, but about the breeches and the linen clothes, and why when you went outside, if someone touched what the priests are going to be eating, they will be holy. So we want to see, we're talking about what they're wearing now, but if you touch what the priest was to be eating, they're holy, and that's not a compliment. See, we usually think that, but it's in a context, no, you don't want to do that. You'll be equal to him, and you're not supposed to be the high priest. You're not supposed to be a priest. So you don't go there. And we'll get to that when we have it. But this was distinct upon them, and part of it was the sweating problem. They would be working on the altar. They're covering their nakedness, and God he's commanding this to be done. This is inside information for the priest. Moses, you tell Aaron and his son, this is what is needed to do. We've already talked from Mount Sinai about to the people, but this is a very much of emphasis upon them. So, in these verses, beginning with verses 14 through 18, what new fact about the meal offering do you learn in verses 14 through 18? So let me just start reading. I think this first part we've already learned. We've already read. This is the law of the meal offering. The sons of Aaron shall offer it before Jehovah, before the altar. He shall take up therefrom a handful of the fine flour of the meal offering, and of the oil thereof, and all the frankincense which is upon the meal offering, and shall burn it upon the altar for its sweet savor, as a memorial, therefore, unto Jehovah. You say, we're just rehashing this stuff. Why are we talking about that in Leviticus? It's not a rehash. It's bringing us up to date with what we already know, and then he's going to lay something on you that you haven't learned before in Leviticus. And we're going to now get that. And we want to pick that up. So why does he say it's a memorial thereof? Why does he say that about the meal offering? It's a memorial. And how does God use it with Cornelius? Your prayers have come up as a memorial before me. What does that mean? What would that mean to you? If your prayers have come up as a memorial unto me. What would that mean, Richard? Yeah, and remember us kindly. He remember us favorably. Remember me, oh God. Here's a meal offering that we're offering up unto God, and it's for a memorial. It's to please him. So that's something kind of interesting we'll see. We haven't talked about that before, but all these words mean something, and they're dealing with that aspect of it. So one factor we learned, that's where we are. Thank you. It says, and that which is left thereof shall be Aaron and his sons to eat, and it shall be eaten without leaven, where? In a holy place. Where? In the court of the tent of meeting, and they shall eat it. You haven't learned that before in Leviticus. And now we're saying, priests, this is for you. You need to understand it. Moses had this for Aaron and his priest, and this is what you need to do. And therefore it will be eaten in a holy place. It shall not be baken with leaven. I've given it as their portion of my meal offerings made by fire. It is the most holy. When it's the most holy, they're probably going to be able to eat that. It's for God's service with his priest and so forth. And as the sin offering and as the trespass offering. So I got 3 offerings that we've already studied, and we got an indication that trespass, sin offering, and meal offering, they could eat it. They could eat that. But they were to eat it now in a holy place. Every male among the children of Aaron shall eat of it. It says, it is as the portion forever throughout your generations from the offerings of Jehovah made by fire, and whosoever toucheth them shall be holy. I want to get a hold of that that's going to be eaten by the priest because I want to be holy. No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be in that situation. We could talk about that, but Isaiah talked about the people who are practicing idolatry, and they said, "I'm more holier than thou." And he said, "That's an abomination to God." It's when I have touched this, and now he said, the point is that it's not that, well, you can touch things and contaminate it. We'll see that a lot. And you can touch things and be holy. That's not this context. It's a warning. This is only for my priest. Because you don't want to be under the guidelines of what's clean with a priest. You got a daughter that becomes a harlot, she will burn with fire. You want that for your daughter? You cannot touch the dead body of the people, only your next of kin, and you want to help the people, and you're just a common citizen, and you'll be unclean. All the restrictions, you don't want to be on that level because that's for the priest. You will be holy. You're taking on those things that only a priest has, is the concept I have of that. And Isaiah will bear it out, and all Scripture, I think, will be consistent with that. But sometimes it's not that sense. Sometimes it is a thing that will bring holiness, not necessarily character, but of cleanness and so forth. So what we find here is that, again, it's going to be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy unto God. That's where it was to be. And there's a meal offering, like the trespass offering, like the sin offering. But I have a question. The sin offering that's offered for the dedication of the priest, could that be eaten by the priest? No. So you've got these generalities, but you better be careful. Because until you take all of what is said, you might miss that one, but we're not going to miss it because we'll put it in its place. But here is that general law. It's going to be eaten. He's now speaking to priests. You will eat that in a holy place, and therefore that becomes something that's new in this section as well. Question number 4. How much fine flour, and I thought I found all the errors, but F-I-N-E, please. How much fine flour was offered when the priest was anointed? So we get into where the priest is being anointed. This is that korban. This is that oblation unto him. You'll add a 10th part of an ephah. That really helps you, doesn't it? You have a 10th part of an ephah, so I can borrow it? I need a little bit over 2 quarts. I need a little bit over 2 quarts of fine flour. Not just flour, fine flour. We know what that is. That's what that was. And that was indeed for the meal offering. We've seen the different types of meal offerings that would take place, where roasted parched grain, meal offering. You got a flat pan where you're baking on like a griddle. You've got an oven bake. You've got all those different types in that section. We've learned about that before. But here we see on its anointing, it will be that. And it'll be offered perpetually as high priests are brought in to the priesthood. Half of it in the morning, half of it therefore in the evening. On a baking pan it shall be made with oil when it is soaked. Thou shalt bring it in, broken pieces. So it'll be kind of like flat wafers, that type of thing, that type of pastry type things. But it is soaked with oil. It shall be brought in, and thou offer the meal offering for a sweet savor unto Jehovah. The anointed priest shall then be in his stead from among his sons, shall offer it by a statute forever, and it shall be wholly burnt unto Jehovah, and every meal offering of the priest shall be wholly burnt, it shall not be eaten. And that's going to be true for the sin offering too. But the meal offering is that here, consecrated unto God, it's not going to be eaten even by him. Priest, you need to understand this. And it's when the sons are bringing him in, he's going to be the high priest, and the sons that shall be in his stead from among his sons that shall offer it. The anointed priest that shall be in his stead. That's here as a change has taken place, and that's going to occur. So we're looking at that amount of flour made into cakes, and we've seen that what type of meal offering was offered. The priest was anointed. What type was that? Well, is it wholly burnt? Yes, as you might want to call that a burnt offering, wholly burnt. That's why you're not eating it. It's a meal offering, though. That's bloodless. That's bloodless. But it's dedicating unto God his servants. And so we might call that a burnt offering, a whole burnt offering unto Jehovah. And those were the things that were not to be eaten at all. Number 6, what new information concerning the sin offering do you learn from verses 24 through 30? Let's just start reading. I think we see some you already know. Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. It's going to be done in the same place where the burnt offering is killed. Shall the sin offering be killed before Jehovah? It is most holy. Again, it's going to be dedicated to be used by God's servants, the priest. But for information for the people, now that'd be important. Where do I take my sin offering? Do I take my burnt offering over here and the sin offering over here? Well, it's one place. It's going to be inside the tent of meeting. That's for the people's information. Here's something for the priest. The priest that offereth for sin shall eat it in a holy place. It shall be eaten in the court of the tent of meeting. Whatsoever shall touch the flesh thereof shall be holy. And when there is sprinkled at the blood thereof upon any garment, thou shalt wash thereupon it was sprinkled in a holy place. See, it's become holy. It's in a place that it should not be, because what's going to happen? I tell you, if it's an earthen vessel, and that burnt offering that was an earthen vessel wherein it was boiled, what shall happen to it? No problem. We'll just put it on the rack and let it dry. What'd you do with it? You broke it. Fat deposits are not going to be lingering on that earthen vessel. It is boiled, shall be broken. If it boiled in a brazen vessel, copper vessel, it shall be scoured and rinsed in water. Every male among the priests shall eat thereof. It is most holy. That most holy, it is extraordinary holy, and it's something special. But it's something special because it's going to be used totally for the priest and in their service, and to pay them for their service and working in the as God's priest. Every male among the priests shall eat thereof. It is most holy. No sin offering whereof any of the blood is brought into the tent of the meeting to make atonement in the holy place shall be eaten. It shall be burnt with fire. We got that. And that's a concept that you need to have in mind, that whenever the blood was taken inside, like the altar of incense, sprinkled on the floor before the curtain, the veil from inside the most holy place, and then it was poured out outside the altar, sprinkled on the altar where they had the burnt offering. But when the blood was taken inside, the body had to be taken outside, and you couldn't partake of that. But these sin offerings, and if it's consecration time for the priest, they could not partake of it. It's like a whole burnt offering that way as well. And we'll see that whole consecration thing. It takes place in Exodus, and we'll look at that, and we'll see it here. And one of the things we're going to see is that there'll be a series of offerings for 7 days, and something happens on the 8th day, and we'll see that. But he's just starting here dealing with these particular offerings. So here's something that's new about the vessels that would be boiled in, or something would be in. It would be broken. It could be cleansed with the copper. You could do that so that it wouldn't saturate the earthen vessel. And that's kind of what was occurring. Question 7. What information concerning the trespass offering do you learn from 7:1 through 6? This is the law of the trespass offering. It is most holy. In the place whereof they kill the burnt offering, they shall kill the trespass offering. The blood thereof shall be sprinkled upon the altar round about. He shall offer all of it, the fat thereof, the fat tail, the fat that covereth the inwards, the 2 kidneys, the fat that is in them, which is by the loins. Will that be burnt on the altar? Whose food is that? The fat. It's God's. And that's his portion of these sacrifices. And the priest shall burn upon the altar for an offering made by fire unto Jehovah. It is a trespass offering. Every male among the priests shall eat thereof. It shall be eaten in a holy place. It is most holy. And as a sin offering, so is a trespass offering. There is one law for them. The priest that maketh atonement therewith shall have it. So there is the sense that he'll be able to partake of that. Now, verse 8. The priest that offereth any man's burnt offering, even the priest shall have to himself the what? The skin. That went to the priest. I thought it was a burnt offering, it was whole burnt offering. Yeah, but you got the skin. You don't eat the flesh. You got the skin, which is offered. Every meal offering that is baken in the oven, that is dressed in the frying pan, there's your different types of meal offerings. On the baking thereof shall the priest eat and offer. Every meal offering mingled with oil and dry shall be of the sons of Aaron, one as well as another. So they're partaking of these things. But the idea of the skin belonging to the working priest who is offering a burnt offering, that's new. Thank you. Question 8. Did the priest have portions of all 5 offerings? I've been guiding you, been leading up, and we cannot say, well, yeah, but you'll have to do that. You'll have to do it. We've already seen the exceptions here. Somebody say something? Surrey? Yes. He's been saying they'll partake of that. But there's conditions where they wouldn't. Certain situations they weren't doing that. So there's our 5 sacrifices we've seen. The priest will have a portion of that. It's being offered up unto God. And some of these, the people would be able to partake them as well. Briefly describe 3 types of peace offerings. So let's come now to chapter 7. We've got a few moments left. Verse 11. This is the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings, which you shall offer unto Jehovah. If you offer it for a what? Thanksgiving. Would that be a willing offering or something that's mandatory to you? Thanksgiving. It's willing. I'm thankful. Let's go offer sacrifice. It's a peace offering. God will partake of that. The priest will partake of that, and I'm going to partake of that. And I'll do a lot of this in my home. The priest is going to do it in the holy place. If he offers her a thanksgiving, then he shall offer it with the sacrifice of thanksgiving unleavened cakes mingled with oil, and unleavened wafers anointed with oil, and cakes mingled with oil of fine flour soaked. With the cakes of leavened bread he shall offer his oblation. With the cakes of leavened bread he shall offer his oblation. I tell you, leaven is always evil, isn't it? No. With cakes of leavened bread he shall offer his oblation with sacrifice of his peace offerings for thanksgiving. And if he shall offer one of each oblation for peace offerings for thanksgiving. So now drop into verse 15. The flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offerings for thanksgiving shall be eaten. But verse 16, if the sacrifices of oblation be a vow or free will offering. So what's the difference between a free will offering and a thanksgiving offering if the teacher asks you to give 3 types? Okay? Humor me. You know, Thanksgiving is free will. Let's talk about something else. No, I think there's a distinction there. I can be thankful in a general way, but Thanksgiving may be something that is specific. There's something specific that's happened, and I offer that unto God. It's a thanksgiving offering. Yes, it's a free will offering, but the free will offerings are more general. I can be thankful for a lot of things and offer that. But what was not going to be a free will offering? Vow. You better pay your vows. And when you offer a vow, you're going to just seal that with this peace offerings that you're offering unto God, sharing with him. And I've made a vow. Paul would make sure that the people he's with, that they would fulfill their vow. They offered up sacrifices in connection with that. And so forth. The Nazarite vow has fulfilled his vow. He would offer up a lot of sacrifices unto God, as we'll see in Numbers. So there's a distinction in 3 of them. They're connected with peace offerings because it's thanksgiving, it's a vow, it's the idea of fellowship. I'm fellowshipping God and fellowshipping one another in these peace offerings. And that's what we're seeing that's taking place there. We won't have time to finish this, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. What distinguishes the wave offering from the heave offering of the peace offering?
How they were done.
All right.
Reading it correctly.
Yep.
The offering, you were it was more of an up and down, and the wave was a side to side. That's what I got.
Well, I think I got the same thing. You heave it up, and you say, well, what's the significance for that? Well, there's a sense of something that has been an emphasis upon dedicated unto God. And the wave offering was something that might be spread out among ourselves. Listen to verse 30. His own hand shall bring the offerings of Jehovah made by fire. The fat with the breast shall he bring, that the breast may be waved for a wave offering before Jehovah. Now, who would get the fat? God. And the priest would get the breast. Thank you. And we got to cut that off. Not the breast. We got to cut this off. And the heave offering will be the shoulder. So we'll see that'd be a difference, but I think that's a good beginning place, and we'll pick that up, Lord willing, next week. Thank you.